be a judge of a debate when you're literally saying, I will never vote for one side of the debate on so many issues? Like, how is that fair to a competitor? Because you don't get to pick your issue or what side you're assigned.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Base Politics Podcast. I'm Hannah Cox with Brad Polumbo. This week, woke politics are ruining high school debates, back to the Titanic and class warfare, Dave Portnoy goes after New York City pizza Karens, and so much more. Let's jump in.
Now, I want to get on to our main topic today, which is something really near and dear to my heart, fascinates me quite a bit. Did you ever do high school debate or anything like that?
No, I thought it was for nerds, but in hindsight, I should have. I think I would have killed it and probably gotten a lot of scholarships.
Yeah, so my high school didn't have debate, but it did have mock trial, which is very similar. And I competed competitively in mock trial throughout high school and actually in college, traveling around the country, which is where I honed some of those debate skills that I often will use now. So I think this stuff plays a really important role in like building confidence for young people, honing your rhetoric and argument debate skills, keeping your mind open, keeping your mind sharp, teaching young people the value of free speech and the battle of ideas. But of course, like anything else, even high school debate is being infected with woke politics that are tearing it down from within and basically, I think, destroying it or turning it into something that really isn't about debate at all. So there's a new two-part expose by a man named James Fishback in an outlet called The Free Press, which you and I both really like. They're the ones that produced the really interesting podcast series on J.K. Rowling. So in this, this guy, James, who was a former debate champion and then coached a debate team, he goes through how it's been, quote, hijacked by political and ideological judges. And the first iteration of his series went mega viral. Everyone from Ted Cruz to Ro Khanna shared it. And there was a kind of bipartisan dismay at some of this stuff because he went through and he shows you in debate, the high school debate system, they use a system called tab room where you can see judges at these big tournaments, what their, quote, paradigms are. Now, a paradigm basically describes them as a judge and what they're looking for in the debaters. Let me read you one from a judge named Lila Lavender. Quote, before anything else, including being a debate judge, I am a Marxist-Leninist Maoist. I cannot check the revolutionary proletarian science at the door when I'm judging. I will no longer evaluate and thus never vote for rightist, capitalist, imperialist positions or arguments. Examples of arguments of this nature are as follows. Fascism good, capitalism good, imperialist war good, neoliberalism good, defenses of U.S. or otherwise bourgeoisie nationalism, Zionism or normalizing Israel, colonialism good, U.S. white fascist policing good, etc. So that's just one example. There's many more. But do you think that judge, who's a very high-level judge and a former debate champion, would be equipped to fairly judge a neutral debate?
No, and I also think calling yourself a Leninist or a Maoist is equivalent to calling yourself a Nazi. Those are genocidal maniacs. And you brazenly saying openly that that is what you support, I think you should be shunned from polite society. You're a psychopath. That's not acceptable. It should be treated exactly the same as saying you're Nazi. Those ideologies and those leaders killed absolutely as many, if not more people than Hitler himself. So I think that's a disgusting thing to open with. She should not be qualified to do anything, period, like anything that's evaluating anything because she's cracked. But especially, obviously, you should not be judging something when you were so openly biased and out of your mind.
How can you be a judge of a debate when you're literally saying, I will never vote for one side of the debate on so many issues? Like, how is that fair to a competitor? Because you don't get to pick your issue or what side you're assigned, I don't believe. And even if you do, you should be allowed to make a good faith case for something, and it should be evaluated based on, how well you debate it, because that's the point of debate, not about which ideas are good and bad. But it wasn't just one example. He writes that in the past few years, judges with paradigms tainted by politics and ideology are becoming common. Debate judge Shubham Gupta's paradigm reads, quote, if you are discussing immigrants in a round and describe the person as illegal, I will immediately stop the round give you the loss with low speaker points, give you a stern lecture, and then talk to your coach. I will not have you making the debate space unsafe. So many other What? Go ahead.
They said unsafe.
Unsafe. If you use the
Ideas are
term, which,
unsafe.
by the way, first off, I think there's nothing wrong with saying illegal immigrant. That's snowflakery. They're an immigrant who came here illegally. Well, think of that what you may. Illegal alien is actually a term under federal law. So the idea that that's the definition, that you would use that and get in trouble and be somehow shunned or punished. What? And also, how does it doesn't make anyone physically unsafe to hear a word they don't like. Give me a freaking break, people.
Yeah, I'm so tired of that narrative. Words are not violence. And unless somebody is exactly using their words to threaten you, that is a ridiculous thing to assert. And I think as a whole, if you really are on the side of supporting immigrants, just picking one out of many things they lobbed here, but this is your whole issue and you want this to be the prevailing idea that people accept, then you want the opposing side to have to come debate it and be made a fool of. I think on immigration, personally, it's one of my favorite issues to debate because almost all of the actual data and evidence and economics are on the side of pro-immigration. It's a very easy debate to win based on the facts. Now, are people emotional about it? Do they have biases? They have preconceived notions that they bring into that? Sure, of course. And that's where debate tactics and skill come into play, being able to overcome those things on the other side. But to try to say that somebody cannot support banning illegal immigrants or that they can't present their case for that, that's actually really, really silly because you're not going to be able to change people's minds if you merely just want to shut down the opposition, right? If
you're actually giving them an opt-out, right? You're like, they don't have to defend their stuff on the merits because they can just say, oh, these woke people won't debate us, whatever, because they're silly. I think it's so, that would be a toxic attitude to encounter anywhere, but at the highest levels of high school debate, it's particularly astounding. Another,
right.
Sorry, yep.
Well, I was just going to say that, I mean, the whole point of this competition is debate. And so I think increasingly we see in society people not wanting to have to debate their ideas. This has been circulating with the Joe Rogan, RFK Jr., Peter What's-His-Face, the scientist who's super pro-lockdown, and he won't debate RFK on vaccines. And there's like a lot of people in the mainstream media on the left that say, no, he shouldn't have to. And it's like, no, but you should have to defend your ideas in the public space. If you choose to step into it, then you do have to debate. You do have to compete in the marketplace of ideas. If you can't do it, stay home. Don't put yourself into the public square in the first place. But when you get to debate, like a debate team, this is the very essence of why everybody is there. This is the entire point, is to debate ideas. And yet, even in this specter, we find that these people don't think they should have to actually compete. They don't think they should actually have to defend their ideas, and they want to shut down dissent. And this is just, it's such a corrosive mentality. And I think it's kind of interesting because it's a huge self-own and they don't even recognize it, that by having this attitude and by refusing to engage, you're not shutting down dissent. Sorry, guys, we've won this battle. We are in the age of information. The ideas have been democratized. People have access to all kinds of mentalities and philosophies and arguments they've never had before. So if you're choosing to opt out and refusing to participate, that's not you automatically winning. That is actually, in fact, making people think that you don't have the arguments on your side, that you can't actually hold your own, and therefore probably they're going to be more swayed to those people who do actually come in and express themselves fully.
I think so, but you know it actually gets worse.
Oh, God.
So we went from dismissing arguments and saying you won't win if you make this argument, is what the judges are saying. Now, in the second iteration of this expose, we're learning that they're not even engaging in arguments in some of these debates, but instead just doing character assassination for like trying to cancel their opponent rather than actually make the argument. So one debater told the Free Press that in April of 2022, he competed at the prestigious Tournament of Champions in Lexington, Kentucky, where he debated in favor of the federal government increasing its protection of water resources. In his final round of the two-day tournament, Matthew was shocked to hear the opposing team levy a personal attack against him as their central argument. The opposing team argued, quote, "This debate is more than just about the debate. It's about protecting the individuals in the community from people who proliferate hatred and make this community unsafe," end quote. They then pulled up a screenshot of a tweet from earlier that month, which Matthew had responded to. The tweet said, "Name one thing that you personally feel is morally disgusting, but that you think rationally should be illegal and accepted by society." Matthew had replied, quote, "calling people racial or homophobic slurs," end quote. Now, suddenly, Matthew's 6-word tweet and an accompanying Discord message became the whole focus of the round. U.S. water policy be damned. You can read his opponent's entire argument. It's a rambling 25-page treatise in a multi-font format with no real mention of U.S. water policy. And what's most incredible, this is all from the Free Press, is that this argument actually won the round. In the written decision, the judge, Jacob Wilkes, explained his reasoning for giving Matthew's opponents the win. Quote, "A debate space where racist or violent people are not allowed is preferable to one where they are," he wrote, adding that the ballot has a transformative power to challenge white debate norms where it is okay to just let racist or violent activity slide. This judge, who has judged 488 debaters at dozens of tournaments, literally allowed one personal attack, a cancellation of a tweet, to outweigh any actual argument of the debate. I think this is one of the craziest stories I've ever heard, starting with the fact that there's nothing even wrong with what he tweeted.
No, it was literally a pro-free speech tweet. He says he dislikes these things. He finds them
it's morally bad.
Morally wrong, and yet that is what free speech is about. We don't have free speech to say things that everybody agrees with. That's ridiculous. And again, that is the whole point of debate. I have a question as you're saying all of this. This is schools, so I'd assume these are mostly public schools. Is this a publicly funded, like, team or activity? Like, what is the...
Yeah, I would assume so. It's got to be like an extracurricular association that's then a bunch of schools, probably public and private, participate, if I had to guess, but I'm not sure.
Because I would think if this was a public school hosted activity, sponsored activity, that there would be grounds to actually like sue over this. This would be blatant free speech violations that should not be allowed with tax dollars, right?
I don't know, because it's extracurricular stuff is kind of a different terrain when you don't have as, I don't know, I can't honestly have no idea about this specific case, but when I have studied like First Amendment cases related to the school system, students have a much stronger case when it comes to parts of curriculum or like mandatory things, and they tend to have a much weaker case when it comes to extracurricular stuff. Not that they can never win, but I don't know, because this is just, I really don't know. And I think it's too late for there to be any recourse for these people anyway. But look, it's crazy, because even if he had tweeted something offensive, which he did not, even if he had, what the heck does that have to do with a debate over U.S. water policy? Do we really want to be telling our young people that they can win debates over complex and important societal issues, not by making any argument or citing any facts or any logic, but just by canceling their opponents? That's literally the message being sent here. And it's not just one judge, Hannah. So he then looked and found more judges who openly state in their paradigms, remember that's their public statements telling what they're looking for, that they will consider this kind of approach. One judge named Zachary Reshovsky, his paradigm tells students, quote, "I will consider indictments of an opponent on the basis they have done or said something racist, gendered, or phobic in their personal behavior. The indictment, however, needs to be clearly documented. Example, a screenshotted Facebook post, an accusation with references to multiple witnesses who can corroborate the incident, and the offending violation/action needs to fall into the category of commonly understood violations of norms of basic decency surrounding race/gender. He continues by stating that microaggressions will be considered, even if they are more difficult to prove or document. For folks that don't know, microaggressions are like tiny verbal tics that apparently harm minorities because they're subconsciously racist or something, but the entire thing is absurd. The University of Minnesota, and I think we ran through this ages ago, they list examples of microaggressions such as the phrase, "America is a melting pot," quote, or, quote, "I believe the most qualified person should get the job," quote. So you are literally saying openly as a debate judge that you will accept arguments that just try to cancel somebody for some minor violation of a social norm rather than make any actual argument? What is going on? Whatever this system is that allows this needs to be torn down and build something new, because
Yeah.
beyond redemption, if we're talking about debate.
If anything needs to be canceled, it's this whole competition and start anew. I mean, this is really, this is what you expect from Twitter trolls, right? This is what somebody who's like in their mom's basement is doing online to try to debate. This isn't what people of actual merit and intelligence do to win arguments. And that's something that has rightfully been frowned upon for some time. When you try to just use ad hominem, when you try to just negate somebody's arguments based on who they are or what TV network they're on. This is something I see really low intelligence people do a lot. And I'm going to say it for what it is. I do think it's a low IQ thing. If you can't entertain an idea because it's on Fox News or because it's on CNN, or if you are using somebody's political affiliation to discount everything they say, like, oh, well, they're a Republican, or, oh, well, they're a Democrat, you're low IQ. You're not actually able to engage in ideas. You're not actually able to look at things on their face and process things or see anything with nuance. And that's why I think it was Mark Twain that said it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain ideas that you disagree with and to even examine them and look for error and to seek out things that poke holes in your confirmation bias, because intelligent people don't want to be right just for the sake of being right. They want to make sure they have the correct information, even if it is not something that goes along with their preconceived notions. This is teaching the opposite of all of that. This is not something that's going to create better humans, better civic servants, better people of policy. It's really going to be detrimental if this is what we're telling high schoolers is what it takes to work in the marketplace of ideas and affect change. And it's honestly quite depressing. When I was working for a left-wing organization doing criminal justice reform, I've said in the past, I was exposed to some of these like diversity trainings and various, mentalities that they have. And I really took it as an opportunity to sort of be a fly on the wall and just observe and learn, like, how do people end up thinking some of these things? I was really curious about that because, again, I think being intelligent means being curious about why people think the way they think, what leads them to their conclusions. And a lot of the materials that we were presented with were saying some of these things, like that evaluating people by punctuality or merit or grammar were wrong, or racially, having white supremacy mentalities. And I was like, oh my God, this is actually, one, very offensive to people of color to suggest that they can't be punctual, they can't use correct grammar, they can't work hard. Ooh, what a disgusting thing to say in the first place. But secondarily, if you want people to be able to pull themselves out of poverty, if you want people to be able to improve their circumstances, then you need to be teaching them things like grit, like a work ethic, like, working hard to get things correct in emails, like showing up on time, like being able to actually debate. This is just one of many instances I've seen recently of this kind of mentality. And I think it is something that is going to be very detrimental to anybody who buys into it. This is not something that's going to help you get ahead in life. This is not something that's going to help you succeed in putting your ideas into practice. And I guess on one hand, I have to look at it and be kind of glad, because they're creating a lot of really ineffective little social justice warriors on the left, who think that they're getting the tools they need to win. In reality, they've got nothing in their arsenal.
Hey guys, Brad here. I just want to make sure you're staying in the loop on all things space politics. We've also got 2 new shows you should check out. One is my new show, Damage Control, where I'm teaming up with right-of-center LGBT guests to restore sanity on these increasingly unhinged issues. Then there's Hannah's show, Propaganda, where she's reacting to videos of police brutality and exposing the systemic flaws in the U.S. criminal justice system. Check these all out on our individual Facebook and YouTube pages. And remember, Base Politics is a nonprofit organization, so you can help us move the culture through content by going to base-politics.com and donating today.
All right. Well, we have to go back to the Titanic story this week, and I can't say that I'm sad about that because I am a Titanic nerd, and we loved talking about it last week for many, many reasons. Now there's even more to add to it. So I want to return to comments that have been made, just as an update. I'm sure most people have seen, but unfortunately, the 5 people that they were searching for in the submersible were not recovered. They have now announced that it likely imploded, which means they fortunately did die very quickly. They weren't down there suffocating. So I think that is actually the best case alternative to finding them alive. And it's a very, very sad scenario for all of their families and friends. And I did see one thing that really broke my heart. Apparently the 18, 19-year-old kid that was down there with his
Yeah.
dad. Didn't even want to go. He went because it was Father's Day.
Ah,
Oh, broke my heart.
heartbreaking.
Awful. But so anyways, I want to pick back up as what has transpired after these people, or after what happened has been discovered, because I think what this is turning into is a good old case of class warfare. And I find that really interesting because the Titanic itself and the whole tragedy around it was riddled with issues of class welfare as well, because you had first, second, third class passengers that impacted who initially was saved, who wasn't, who had access to lifeboats, who didn't. And now with the second case around the Titanic, we are seeing very similar issues being presented, but not in a ethical light. So I initially thought this was sort of just on the internet, seedy, gross, like left-wing
Same.
people. It's apparently not, because President or former President Obama has now weighed in and echoed what many of the people online have been saying. Let's roll his clip.
I do think there's an economic element to our democracy that we have to pay attention to. Our democracy is not going to be healthy with the levels of inequality that we've seen generated from globalization, automation, the decline in unions, obscene inequality. You think about news of the day. Generally, we're not talking about news of the day, but right now we have 24-hour coverage, and I understand it, of this submarine, the submersible, that tragically is right now lost at the bottom of the sea. At the same time, right here, just off the coast of Greece, we had 700 people dead, 700 migrants who were apparently being smuggled into here. And it's made news, but it's not dominating in the same way. And in some ways, it's indicative of the degree to which people's life chances have grown so disparate. It's very hard to sustain a democracy when you have such massive concentrations of wealth.
Yeah, so what Obama's referencing there is the fact that around the same time, there was another tragedy going on off the coast of Greece where a boat full of refugees, I believe mostly from Pakistan, sank. And while 100 were rescued, many, many hundreds more died or drowned, and hundreds more are missing. And it's a pretty heartbreaking incident. We unfortunately see that kind of thing like rafts and poorly constructed rafts and boats where refugees try to sail somewhere because if they can land there, they can claim asylum or refugee status if they touch the ground or whatever it may be. But then he's saying that, and this was a very popular narrative online, that society only cares about the billionaires and doesn't care about the poor people. I think this narrative is bunk for a bunch of reasons, but Hannah, give me your thoughts before I go off on my soapbox.
Well, I always first and foremost find it really interesting when we're criticizing what's in the media, period, because the media is presenting what they think people want to hear and will click on. And if it isn't what people are tuning into and clicking on, they will quickly move away from a story because they are driven by clicks to make money. They are driven by eyeballs to make money. So when people start criticizing a story being popular, I'm like, turn the finger right back around on yourselves because you are the one that is driving the narrative. And certainly social media was the one that first kind of grabbed onto this story about the Titanic submersible. That's where I first saw it, long before the mainstream media jumped on board. It was TikTok, it was Twitter. And so I thought that was a little bit just hypocritical. And then additionally, I thought it didn't really make sense because this story about the refugee boat was also all over my timeline quite quickly. And yes, I do think that was more so because grassroots content creators were raising it online, but they were out in masses talking about this. So to say that society
did get
care,
less coverage, though, to be fair.
less for sure, but to say society just doesn't care about this, I don't think that that's accurate. Did it get the same degree of like intense interest? No, but I think you've laid out some things in your Newsweek article we want to dig into here that I think are really good explanations for why that is, that have nothing to do with what they're trying to allege here, which has been that basically one of these boats had a lot of billionaires, so people cared a lot about it, and one of these boats had poor refugees and people didn't care about it. I simply don't think that that's accurate. And the only other thing, my first instinct before I read your article on that was also, one of these things is American adjacent, right? It's an American company. It happened off the coast of America. People are very familiar with Titanic, even though it was sort of like going from England to America when it sunk. It's kind of been considered like an American tragedy. And I'm sorry, but America dominates the global news. It just is what it is. Travel to other countries, turn on their news networks. They're talking about America. They're talking about what's happening here. Whereas the other one happened off the coast of Greece, which is just, sorry, not that interesting to most people. People aren't following Greek politics. They're not following what's happening in Greece that often. And I think that was my first instinct. But you presented some other arguments that I think are really interesting for why one story got so much more attention that have nothing to do with class.
It's simply not about money, because it's about the uniqueness of the circumstances. The Titanic submersible thing, where we thought they were trapped at the bottom of the ocean 2.5 miles down in this crazy vehicle. It is unique and novel and terrifying and darkly entertaining, whereas it's really sad, but boats full of refugees drown pretty regularly. It's not unique or different. It doesn't capture the imagination in the same way. And it doesn't have anything to do with the money, because you'll remember just a few years ago, there was this huge story about this Thai soccer team that got a boys soccer team with their coach that got trapped in a cave system and for almost 2 weeks. And there was this huge international effort with divers and people coming in from all across the world, US, UK, Australia, to come help and assist in their rescue. And they were ultimately rescued, although one diver, a heroic diver, died in the process. And they were rescued, and this got the same kind of attention. It was the biggest story in the world for like 2 weeks. And none of them are wealthy at all, because it's not about the wealth. These people are just, they want to make anything into class warfare politics, but it really had nothing to do with money. It had to do with the circumstances, the uniqueness, the American tie-in, the fact that it's off the coast. Is it morally right that we as a society, as a global community, as media consumers, care more about some deaths than others? Maybe not, but it's not class warfare related whatsoever. Yet that has been the narrative. And at first it was just fringe people, like you said, but now it's filtered through the mainstream media and even mainstream liberal figures like Obama. That's the narrative they're going with. And I find it really contemptible. I really do. I find it gross that they're taking tragedies and politicizing them to wage their ideological war against the wealthy or against inequality or whatever. It's just distasteful to me.
Yeah, I think it was important to point out this was an outlier event, and so it did grab more attention, and people are limited, and it's really awful, but there are so many tragedies that happen every day around us. We cannot possibly pay attention to all of them or equally care about all of them. I do think another thing that made this different was that I never thought this was actually accurate, but a lot of people thought there was hope that those people on the submersible could be recovered. I think most people who were pretty aware of like the actual circumstances of what they were playing with didn't actually think that, but a lot of people did. And so you sort of had this like race against time, optimism, hope for the best. And I think that's a really good part of humanity where we really want to save people if at all possible. And we'll go to great lengths to save anybody, right? Any single individual, we will really go to bat for if we can to try to save them. And that's admirable. But instead of celebrating that human spirit and attention to individual life, I saw a lot of people on the left sort of saying like, well, we shouldn't be having to pay for these kinds of resources to go after these people. It's it's not right that tax dollars are being used to search for them. And again, I just think it's proof that the left's ideology is inhumane oftentimes, especially when you get into like progressive communist actual ideology. You have to dehumanize people. You lose respect for individual life. And that is just such a permeant part of their mentality. And that was really on rank display. And it was disturbing to watch. I really found it quite stomach turning. Again, the media is going to cover things that are interesting to people. And I think sometimes you do see some factors, like, for example, when a young woman goes missing, you're probably more likely to hear about it if she's very pretty and young. That is fair, but that is what is going to get the nation's attention. But that being said, on the other hand, if there's a police shooting, you're more likely to hear about it if the person was black, right? I covered Duncan Lempon propaganda this week, which was a horrific case that I think hardly anybody's heard of. And probably the fact that he was white had something to do with it. So you can say that like at times there is a class issue or a race issue or a gender issue and what gets attention and what doesn't. But I think there's always sort of other instances that prove that that's not consistently true. It really is just the circumstances of each case There are factors that make it more interesting to the public. And if you don't like that, guess what? You, as a person with fingers and a keyboard, have the ability to bring attention to whatever tragedies are compelling to you, to whatever you want to choose to elevate and to become an activist on. That's your prerogative. And if you want to change what the media is talking about, don't click on things that you don't think are interesting. So the whole kind of narrative around this, I just thought was really bothersome and incorrect. But I also think, more importantly, it did get to this really awful display of how little some people care about others if they have more wealth than them. And it is becoming something that I think is not just attached to communism, socialism, progressivism in this society. I really think we are becoming a nation of people who are overcome with greed and envy. And I think some of that is driven by social media. You know, back in the day, people kind of lived in their bubbles. Even though they knew other people were wealthier than them, they didn't have it like right in front of them every day. Most of their neighbors were making about what they were making. Most of the people they were in school with were making about what they were making. They weren't having to be presented with people who lived extravagantly better than them. Social media, I think, has created a problem in that way, where people are day in, day out presented with people who are living better than them, or who at least make it look like they are living better than them.
Big difference.
But it's leading a lot of people to just be overcome with jealousy and greed. And in the process, there really do seem to be a number of people who no longer think people who are wealthier than them have value. I want to play just one of many, many clips I have seen on TikTok over the past week expressing the sentiment.
I don't know what a lot of people thought when they said eat the rich. Like, I don't know if it was a cute saying for them or something. But for many people, eat the rich means do just that. Hoarding wealth is so harmful, so unethical, so rage-inducing that the only way to fix the problem is to get rid of the rich, to eat them. They must perish. And when it plays out in real time, when we saw so much time and energy and resources go towards looking for a handful of missing billionaires, as opposed to saving the lives of 500 migrants, yeah, baby, people are not going to be sad when they go. So many people who said, eat the rich, are now, how can you be so cruel? It's another human life. How can you be so mean when people say they don't care? Because they meant eat the rich. Class consciousness will never come if y'all keep being so wishy-washy. You can't say eat the rich and then expect me to grieve them. No, baby, I want to eat them. They must perish.
Brad, if I could enact one policy right now, it would be to deport every single person like this in exchange for an immigrant who wants to come here and work. This is awful, vile, horrific. I don't want to be anywhere near this person. She gives me the creeps. Put her on an island. Like, I can't. The fact you're going to come on the internet with your whole face in the screen and profess these kinds of views is just crazy town to me.
When you find yourself celebrating death, you're not the good guy. You're not. And I'm sorry, but rich people are people. They have loved ones, they have families, they have friends, they have people who will weep and are mourning right now. And you're so obsessed with your hatred and class envy that you're celebrating their deaths. You really need to reevaluate. You really need to touch grass, get back in touch. Also, this idea that by being rich, you're depriving others is a total economic fallacy, because you create wealth, right? Innovators, it's estimated by economists that they only keep about 2% of the wealth they create for society, right? They create countless jobs and opportunities and income for other people on their way to getting rich. It's not like by hoarding wealth, they're depriving other people. It's also like, even if you hate the rich this much, couldn't you just support taxing their money away? Why do you have to support eating, which she's using as a euphemism for killing, right? Why do you have to support that? You don't. Even if you are a hardcore commie progressive, you could simply support confiscating their wealth. You don't have to support killing them unless you're literally just like demented and just want to harm people, honestly. And this video was very popular, and it was one of so many expressing the sentiment. And where is this coming from? This hatred. It's really, really dark stuff.
I can explain it, actually. And this is a really dark side of human nature, but it goes back to this whole thing of trying to discredit merit. And this is something I see people like her say a lot, where they want to claim that anybody who's a billionaire, anybody who's wealthy, they didn't get it by hard work. They didn't get it by being smarter than you or more innovative than you. They got it because of nepotism. And you will see whole channels devoted to trying to debunk success, trying to show that anybody from singers to business owners to innovators were handed their wealth and therefore are no better than you. And I think it's because when you see somebody who's overcome by greed and envy, it's not just that they want what the other person has. That's a part of it. It's more so that they are being confronted with their own inadequacies when they have to look at these people and their own failures in life and their own ineptitude and their own lack of talent or skill or intellect. And instead of saying, you know, this makes me feel kind of bad about myself and I really don't like how this makes me feel and maybe I should do something about it and start working to improve or get better, instead of being inspired by success and by people who are doing more than you in the world, which is how I feel when I look at people like that. They instead they want so badly to blame the other person, to make them disappear, to knock them down so that they can get rid of that feeling. And it's just an awful, awful component of human nature that people need to be aware of and work to overcome. You don't have to do this. You can go out and start actually just improving your life. And you might not ever achieve as much as a billionaire. You might not ever create something of that much value, but you certainly will be better than somebody who's on the internet saying things like this. And that should be your goal, because I just think this is the bottom barrel of humanity and it's such a pathetic excuse for existence. You get one life. Go do something more with it than this. It's not going to make you feel better. You're never going to be able to eradicate people who are more successful than you. So what you need to learn to do is to not see it as an insult to yourself, but constantly work to improve and to actually feel good about what you're doing with your own life. Hey guys, Hannah here. Big things are happening at Base Politics, and we want to make sure you stay in the loop with all of our productions and developments. If you like the Base Politics podcast, you can find it every Wednesday morning on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Brad's YouTube. If you want to support the show, be sure to join the Base Politics Locals channel, where you can help produce it for only $5 a month. You can also catch our new shows, Propaganda and Damage Control, every Saturday on our respective YouTubes and Facebook channels. On Damage Control, Brad teams up with right-of-center LGBT guests to restore sanity to the increasingly unhinged debate over these issues. And on Propaganda, I'm taking video footage of police behaving badly every week and using those videos to expose problems within U.S. policing and the laws that guide it. Remember, Base Politics is a nonprofit organization dedicated to moving the culture through content. If you want to be a part of these efforts, you can donate to fund our work at base-politics.com.
All right, up next, let's turn to our quick hit segment. First, we're going to react to some interesting comments that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis made when he was recently asked if he supports decriminalizing marijuana at the federal level. Take a listen.
I'm here on behalf for a request for a couple of broken veterans with service-connected disease, illness, and injury. And we are saying, please, please, will you decriminalize marijuana in 2025?
I don't think we would do that, but I think what I've done in Florida is we have a medical program through our Constitution that the voters did. And so the veterans who are in those situations in Florida, you know, they're actually allowed access. It's very controversial because obviously there's some people that abuse it and are using it recreationally. But I will say this, nationally, or even on the local level, you know, this stuff is very powerful now that they're putting on the street. And when these kids do it, it's really bad for the youth. And I just think we have to be very united as a society. We want our kids to stay clear of drugs. And we don't want to do policies that's going to make it have easier access for them. You don't even know what they're putting in some of this stuff now because you have things like fentanyl that can wind up. And so if you do something with that, it could be good night right then and there. And you could die just by ingesting that. So I think that that's problematic. I think that we have too many people using drugs in this country right now. I think it hurts our workforce readiness. I think it hurts people's ability to prosper in life.
So I have so many problems with this, but first, literally everything he's saying could be said about alcohol, and he does not support prohibiting that.
I mean, every argument that he gives is actually not a concrete argument for the stance that he supports. And I want to break down a number of these things, but when he says that too many kids are using drugs. One, I'll say too many kids and dogs are using drugs, apparently. But having it as an illegal substance doesn't actually make it harder for kids to access this product. If anything,
No,
you
then there's a
create
black market. They
market
can access
that makes it easier.
If it was all legal stores, then they'd be 18 and up, right? Or 21 and up.
I mean, not to say that you can't ever access alcohol or cigarettes as a kid, but you have to work pretty hard to do it. And again, I'm not usually somebody that's in favor of regulation, but when it comes to these kinds of substances, I think it is better than the alternative where you don't know what you're getting on the black market. Again, I'm not a big drug user at all, but sometimes when I've been in places like Colorado or like Chicago and I see a legal store, I'll go buy like an edible for anxiety or sleep or something like that. I would never do that in Georgia because it's illegal here. And I would be terrified, one, just legally, but two, because you truly don't know what's in the product that you're getting. So I hate when people try to use the children for literally anything in politics, but especially on subjects like this, because your stance is putting more kids in danger. And I think that it's inexcusable to not know that at this point. I also want to add one other thing that I find so infuriating from conservatives who claim to love veterans and love the military and support the troops. It is a veteran who is asking him about this. It is veterans who are leading the charge for marijuana reform across this country because they are one of the most impacted groups. They are one of the groups that really need this to medicate themselves more than many others. It has much better results than many of the psychedelics they might be provided.
I think DeSantis does support medical, just not recreational.
That's fine, but if you support medical, that means you have to support people having the health care in order to access it. And veterans' health care is a hot mess, and so is that of many other people. And it does make it more expensive because then you have to be able to go pay for doctor's appointments and get prescriptions, and it is just still a pretty high barrier to access it. And on top of that, you still have many, many people who are in jail for nonviolent things that are not even crimes whatsoever, including veterans, right? Like if you have a veteran who is caught with marijuana using it to treat their PTSD, they will still go to jail in a state with medical marijuana unless they have gotten it through a prescription and through a doctor. And that's really silly. So I think this is an anti-veteran stance, and I don't think we talk about that enough.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things with this. One, I just don't think you can call yourself the freedom governor while saying you support like throwing people in jail if they smoke a plant. I'm sorry, that's not freedom. That's not individual liberty. It's not any of the things you say you stand for. But also some of the arguments here are just like fear-mongering with this whole, oh, it's being laced with fentanyl now or whatever, or we don't know what's in it and it's all this stuff. Okay, whatever extent that is happening in black market marijuana sales. The dispensary down the street is not selling a single product with fentanyl in it. And so by supporting the illegality of this, you are supporting not nobody smoking weed. Come on, we live in the real world. You're supporting it happening on the black market, which is where those contaminations occur. Then he talks about workforce preparedness and the ability to prosper and all this stuff. Well, again, newsflash, people are going to smoke one way or another. It's whether they do it in a black market or an illegal market. And secondly, do you know what's really bad for workforce preparedness and ability to prosper? The war on drugs and putting people in jail for victimless crimes is really bad for their ability to prosper or for their families' workforce readiness and economic prospects. Just the whole thing. It makes no sense. It's such a boomer con take. It's so inconsistent with the things he said about individual liberty, bodily autonomy, all these values he's built his reputation around just go all out the window when it comes to, oh, not this plant, not this marijuana, the kids be smoking, oh, no. Like, come on, Ron, come on.
It is really, really hypocritical because so often people who do get mixed up with the justice system over things like marijuana actually are prohibited from getting work in any number of ways after they already serve their time. So again, like I feel like he's talking out of both sides of his mouth throughout this debate. And I want to say that from a plain economic, limited government, smart on crime approach, this desire to continue with the war on drugs at all, but especially within the marijuana argument of it, is completely detached from any of the values you claim. It is so expensive for us to have the war on drugs. We spend millions and millions of dollars a year enforcing it. We have used it to violate countless civil liberties. We use it for police to steal from people left and right under civil asset forfeiture laws. We then spend at least $30,000 to $60,000 a year per inmate to incarcerate people when they are arrested and jailed over these offenses. So not only are you messing with the workforce, breaking up families, and debilitating children, probably leading to likelihood kids get mixed up in drugs too because they're missing a parent and have a destabilized family life, but you are spending so much of our resources on something that isn't a crime at all. Meanwhile, fewer than 60% of homicides get cleared every year, fewer than like 50% of rapes and aggravated assaults, less than like 20% of most property crimes. Police are doing virtually nothing to protect our actual person and property these days. Instead, they are spending their efforts and our tax dollars and our resources, which are limited. You have a scarcity of resources when it comes to the enforcement of crimes. And when you try to police too many things, you end up putting innocent people in jail, having all kinds of secondary effects, and letting the actual violent criminals go. So I think it's inexcusable for any politician to have this perspective at this point in time. You have to be so detached from the basic numbers and practices around this to be able to believe what he believes, that it makes me think you're severely incompetent or you are being intentionally daft.
All right, well, up next, Barstool Sports CEO Dave Portnoy is taking a stand against the climate Karens who are trying to ruin New York City's famous coal-fired oven pizza. Take a listen to his viral rant that he just put out.
The case has been a little like cave. Everyone sent me this story. Apparently, in New York City, some little liberal arts, Ivy League, pink-haired, crazy liberal who's never worked one day in the real world is on an environmental commission. And they woke up from their little nappy poo, wherever that may be. And they're like, I figured out how to save the world today. We have to get rid of coal oven pizzerias in New York City. We got to stop that. The emissions, I guess, is pollution, blah, blah, blah. You know what? Pizzerias use coal ovens. All the best. All the best. John's of Bleecker, Patsy's, Totano's, you name it. Any pizza place that you're like, oh, this is Manhattan. This is old school. This is what people think about when they think of NYC. They have a coal oven. They've been grandfathered in. They've been there for 100 years minimum, most of them.
Well, damn, Dave, tell us how you really feel. He did not hold back on that one, but what he's referring to is this new story in the New York Post. Mamma mia, New York City rules crack down on coal wood-fired pizzerias must cut carbon emissions by up to 75%. And they report that historic Big Apple pizza joints could be forced to dish out mounds of dough under a proposed city edict targeting the pollutant-spewing coal and wood-fired ovens. The New York City Department of Environmental Protection has drafted new rules that would order eateries using the decades-old baking method to slice carbon emissions by up to 75%. The rule could require pizzerias with such ovens installed prior to May 2016 to buy pricey emission control devices, with the owner of one Brooklyn joint saying he's already tossed $20,000 on an air filter system in anticipation of the new mandate. So what this would do is either force businesses to buy this really pricey equipment, which would mean higher prices for consumers, or as they're opening new pizzerias and stuff, to use different types of ovens, though the coal-fired ovens is pretty important to the taste of the pizza. So I just think this is dumb for so many reasons, but like Dave points out, you are not going to make any dent by a few ovens, a couple dozen or whatever, being changed in global carbon emissions or climate change. You're not going to make any dent. You're just going to either piss off some business owners and raise the price of a slice, or have them switch methods and ruin New York City's famous pizza. It's like, can the climate Karens ever do anything that doesn't actually just make things worse?
No, I've said this for so long, but the entire green energy climate agenda is all about making your life harder and more expensive. That is the only thing it will accomplish. It will not accomplish anything meaningful in actually combating climate issues. It is only going to make your life needlessly more hard. I don't understand why anybody would choose to live under these oppressive regimes at this point. I know I myself did a 6-month stint in New York City, immediately regretted it, and actually was a little bit relieved when COVID happened because it gave me a huge excuse to get out of there without admitting that I had made a huge mistake. So I at this point, visit California, visit New York. They're great places to take a week. You can have a great time. You're gonna have a lot more money to spend and enjoy when you live somewhere else and just visit there. But I don't know why you'd subject yourself to this absolute lunacy. Dave Portnoy's a great time. He's a really fun guy. He's a little unhinged, but I like him a lot. And his rant was completely on point. You've got these nasty, massive rants running around the city. It smells awful. I was there a few months ago and I was like, this is disgusting. You come in from the streets, you're dirty. Like, you're actually dirty when you come back, no matter what. It's just covered in soot. I mean, they have so many issues they should actually be addressing in these kinds of places, and yet they continue to use resources like to go after things like this and just make it harder for people to be in business, make it more expensive for them to sell you food, make the cost of living go up for everybody. And also, I'm a little personally annoyed at this story because I've been doing so good with my diet and exercise regime, and now this is all over my timeline and I want nothing more than pizza. So I'm especially mad about this whole initiative.
It's so dumb, and I love his point. Like, the priorities. You have crime, you have subways, you have homelessness out of control, and this is what y'all are working on, really, in the city government? Give me a break. They do this all the time in the cities. They just have totally warped priorities, and that's why people are fleeing them and moving elsewhere, and I think they will continue as long as they keep doing this kind of misguided crap. Up next, we've got an interesting clip of former CNN personality Jeffrey Toobin defending COVID-19 vaccine mandates in an episode of the PBD podcast. Take a listen to this exercise in mental gymnastics.
And I'm sorry, I'm a complete hardliner on this.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Because is that, you know, at CNN and at Fox, you were not allowed in the building unless you were vaccinated.
You think that's the right thing to do?
I thought it was exactly the right
Tell me
thing
why.
to do. Because it's a communicable disease that you could reduce your risk to yourself and to the people around you to a scientific certainty, and that was a rule that was excellent, and I was glad CNN had that rule. I'm sure the people at Fox were glad they had that rule, and you know. Again, this is not, you know, you're allowed to have opinions about anything you want, but at some point when your opinions put other people at physical risk, as, you know, vaccine denial did.
I just can't believe people are still making this argument in June of 2023.
I just can't believe that a man who is most famous for getting caught on Zoom with his pants down and jerking off is calling himself a hardliner. Like, I can't. It's too funny.
Yeah.
I couldn't really think about anything else past that for a solid 10 seconds of this. But let me recover. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a high school boy. But anyways, they are absurd. They really won't admit any error or any fault. They are sticking to their guns, and they had hardly any credibility left after this whole 3-year debacle with the pandemic policies they tried to put into place. But if they wanted to salvage any bit of credibility, any sort of reputation to move forward with, they would show intellectual humility, they would apologize, they would admit error. But nope, not a single one of them, really. I mean, I really don't know of anybody I can point to who's come out and just like, man, really messed that up, really got that wrong. You and I have said all along, we were not anti-vaccine. I'm still not an anti-vaccine person, even remotely. We've both gotten the COVID vaccine. I did it more, to be honest, for convenience because of the rules they put into place. I didn't really think I needed it. I do begrudge the fact that I sort of felt I had to get it just to do my job and continue traveling and living my life. I fortunately was not forced to get it. I know many people who were basically forced to get it because of their jobs. I do think that there are valid concerns with some people who've had very bad reactions to it or side effects. And at the end of the day, that kind of decision over what to put in your body should have always been left up to individuals to evaluate the information and to decide what was best for them to do in their own specific situations.
New.
Mandates were always
unethical.
Something
new. We didn't have the complete information, and yet they were forcing it. And this logic doesn't work. The logic that you don't have the freedom to put other people in danger. Maybe that logic works with some other vaccines, but the COVID-19 vaccine very clearly does not stop, or at this point, I'm not even sure if it reduces transmission of the virus, but it still spreads quite a bit, whether you're vaccinated or not. So it doesn't have any externality impact, right? Like my ability to, I don't put you more or less in danger if I'm vaccinated or not and you're around me. What is true, and what still appears to be true, is that the vaccines were highly effective at reducing hospitalization and death, but that's an individual benefit. That means if it works, you get it and you're protected. You don't need to worry about what anyone else is doing. This logic is totally bankrupt. It never made any sense to mandate this, knowing what we know about it. And I can understand to some extent how people got swept up in the mania of it in the moment, but at least some, a very few, like Piers Morgan, for example, have admitted they were totally wrong to push those mandates. But I don't know how you can be making, this is just mental gymnastics. It's crazy that we're still hearing this in June of 2023. We're still hearing this obviously untrue logic that rests on things and notions that have just proven totally false. And they're just still parroting it. I just don't know. Maybe they just exist in an echo chamber where nobody wants to be smeared or hit with the label of anti-vax, which we're really not. So, but that's what happens in liberal circles. If you made any of these points, if you're anti-mandate, they say you're anti the thing, which is not the same thing. And I just think it's exhausting. I can't believe they're still pulling this crap, and I'm just amazed anyone's buying it.
Yeah, it's honestly infuriating. I had the vaccine and I still had a horrible case of COVID last year. It lasted almost a month, all said and done. And I've been talking recently about how I think I'm suffering pretty significant brain fog and like memory issues from it. So the vaccine certainly did not protect me. Maybe it kept me from being hospitalized or dying. Maybe, I don't know. But I really can't even imagine the fury I'd feel if I was somebody who lost my job over this or had it forced on them, because it certainly was, they put out a lot of actual disinformation around the vaccine, and they've never taken accountability for that or really done anything to clean up their mess. But I think this point that he's trying to make is one you hear people on the left say a good bit of, like, you're responsible for other people's health. And I completely reject it. I hate this notion of public health. No, you are responsible for your own individual health. You are responsible for making decisions that are best for you and for your family, and then you should have the freedom to live those out. You are not responsible for your neighbor's health. You're not responsible for your neighbor's medical bills. I really can't stand this idea. One, the science was never there. They tried to say this about masks. They tried to say it about vaccines. They tried to say it about lockdowns and staying home, that you're being unethical and you don't care about other people if you're not doing these things. The science didn't back that up ever, still doesn't. But on top of that, I would say, even if it did, I still think you as an individual have to worry about your own health, your own surroundings, your own things that are within the ability of your control, and move forward from there.
So
and I think this
let me push you a little bit. I think it doesn't apply to this situation, but there is an extent to which you're not allowed, you're not free to directly endanger others. So a good example of this is HIV. If I am HIV positive and you're a potential partner and I don't tell you, and then we have unprotected relations, you could say, well, it's your responsibility to protect yourself and you should not have had unprotected relations with anyone. Well, no, I also knowingly put you in danger, right? Like, and that's not part of my freedom in any meaningful way, in my opinion. But
right, you're spreading a deadly disease knowingly and intentionally.
And some stuff falls in the gray.
But most diseases are not spread in that way. So with HIV, like, I agree, you're being unethical and you're not being forthcoming about something you have, and that you know you will spread pretty much 100% of the time if you have unprotected sex when you have it. So I agree with people in those circumstances being charged. But I think the vast majority of illnesses are not in that bucket. Like, I'll give another example. I was at a public pool a few days ago and there was a kid with ringworm in the pool. And I, therefore, was not getting in the pool because that can easily be spread through touch, through contact, even through water. But do I think that that person should be, like, banned from society and made to stay home because they have ringworm? No, I think I need to evaluate
the in the pool. Like, with a
maybe,
communicable disease?
But can you prove that that's going to spread, or am I being overly cautious? I don't know. But, like, that's on me to be intentional and to protect myself. And I think if you follow their arguments to the extent of it, the reason they're pushing this so hard is they ultimately want to get to the point of you are responsible for other people's health, i.e. you have to pay for other people's health. That is the end goal of where they're trying to push towards. It's not really about these ethical questions so much as they want you to feel like you have a moral and ethical responsibility in order to make you pay for other people's poor health choices a lot of the times. And I think they use COVID to drive that agenda.
All right, let's transition to our mailbag. First up, we've gotten an email from Stefan, who says he's a longtime fan of the Base Brief. Yours and Hannah's discussions have made me much more informed about the liberty movement, in particular, how the government boosts up pricing for higher education. I work at radio stations in California, and we had the provost of the university, that he'd like to remain nameless, come on to record a program. Off mic, I asked why colleges provide degrees with low market value, for they saddle the student with large debt for a degree that won't be used in the real world. Her response was, paraphrased, some jobs just require you to have a degree. It doesn't matter what, so long as you have a bachelor's in general. This is reason enough to support these types of majors and give them funding. So he says that he thought this anecdote was worth passing along and wanted to know our thoughts. It doesn't surprise me that a university bureaucrat would find justifications to support their own funding for their university. But what I would say is that in a privatized student loan system where you had to go to a bank and say, I need a loan, and they say, well, what are you going to study? They wouldn't approve you for a loan to study something that won't be profitable. But because the government will give you a loan to study any of it, right? That's the only reason these majors exist. Because very, very few departments would exist if people either had to get private loans or pay completely out of pocket for these degrees that don't pay or don't have a good return. The only reason these departments can exist is because of those things. And then the issue of credential inflation is an important one, but that's still not a reason to have people study useless things. It's a reason to stop requiring degrees for so many jobs that don't actually need degrees.
Well, I agree with you, and I certainly think a college bureaucrat's going to be on the side of what is a honestly protectionist racket that college has been used for. And I think if you actually start looking at the labor movement, if you look at public policy, specifically at the state level, how it has matriculated over the years, there has been a real intentionality to try to push people into college degrees because they want to limit competition in many fields. You saw this movement away from things like apprenticeships and trades and people obtaining their pathways into careers apart from college. And it actually was driven oftentimes by labor participants, right? It was regulatory capture. It was people wanting to limit the number of people who were coming in to work in their fields. And so they started doing things like requiring college degrees. And so that's not something that has happened unintentionally. And often governments have been a willing participant in that. We covered recently, I think, or at least I did, Florida getting rid of a requirement that you had to have a degree for many public jobs, many jobs in government. Those are things and initiatives that need to be pushed more heavily because we do see far too many jobs requiring college degrees that really don't actually need to go to college in order to perform the job. So I think that she's right and then also wrong to support such a system, and colleges should maybe be doing more even to push back. And I think if colleges were on the hook for people not being able to pay back their loans and had some actual skin in the game here, they might not have that attitude. All right, well, next up, we have Momo Gen X, who says, Brad, that's not the type of bookshelf you need as a backdrop. I mean, don't you even read or maybe have books on your shelf you haven't because you write? Or is it like I suspect you're not in a basement, but you are filming in the right wing of your grandmother's ranch-assisted living facility based on the bookshelf, maybe the lobby of said facility? This person really hates your bookshelf. That's not really a bookshelf behind him, my friend. That's like an artistic shelf.
Yeah, just put a couple books in it.
Yeah,
Roast me, King.
I don't think you
go off.
And before.
All right. Darth Durkle the Wise says, I enjoy that your show doesn't have a backdrop of bias and seems to focus on common sense, mutual respect, and logic. I despise when folks feel that we need to fit into one bucket or another. When you two spoke on tribe defense to a fault, it definitely struck a chord with me, as this is the very thing that's destroying us in 2023. Hope we can get past this concept as Americans. I completely agree.
Yep, I do think it's one of the worst issues we face, actually, in our country. And unfortunately, there's a lot of money made off divisiveness and keeping people polarized. So it's on each of us to try to overcome that. Mark Brown says, I'm glad I'm not the only one who feels like a complete idiot for not partaking in the COVID grift.
Yeah, we could have all got that bag, boo.
We real missed opportunities there from having morals and values. Sometimes it really sucks to be an ethical person.
Swing Voter says, I object to the whole Karen label. My mother's name is Karen and she's a kind person. I understand the sentiment, but object to the usage. It just rubs me the wrong way. I get it. Look, I've had people refer to Brads and Chads as like a stereotype, but I think you just have to realize it has nothing to do with actual people named that. It's just a shorthand for a behavior that can describe a man, it can describe a woman, it can describe a person by any name. We're just making fun of a behavior. And I also think we have to be careful not to be a little bit snowflakey when it's things that affect us.
Yeah, I mean, ma'am, tell your mom to change her name. Like, we do not care. I think having a, yeah, like, change your name, get over it, come up with a nickname. I don't care. It's out there. It's not going away. And honestly, being offended about the label Karen is real Karen energy. I'm not here for it. Get over it. Wicked Weird Wednesday says, I will never trust my government again. I will never shut my business down again. We will be recovering from this for years to come.
Yeah, I think that's true, especially with schools. That will haunt an entire generation. Josh Rosen says, love the episode. Keep it up. P.S. I'm personally a country music listener, but I'd like to hear your guys' favorite music genre / song of choice at the minute. Hannah, you?
Well, I love country music. That's why I went to work in it. But I love older country music. I really hate the bro country that's taken over. But people often ask me like my favorite genres, and I know everybody says, "Oh, I listen to everything," but like, no, I'm embarrassed to play my Spotify list in front of people because it is quite eclectic. I listen to everything under the sun, but Stevie Nicks is my favorite artist, so I'll throw that one out there.
So I have I listen to mostly basic pop and like a little bit of like alt pop, and my favorite artist right now is Joshua Bassett.
Well, you
go ahead. Sorry.
Lizzie Girl's mom said, as far as our taxpayer money is concerned, I would love it if every time I filled out my taxes, I could put down the top 5 things I want my money to go towards, and then everybody who does your taxes, the top 5 things, those things will be funded. Nothing that we actually want seems to get funded. Things we don't want continually get funded. We live in a cuckoo world. I've seen this idea from several other people online, and I tend to like it. I like the idea of a system where we actually had to vote on proposals that our taxes would fund, which would, of course, mean we had to fund a lot fewer things in order for people to be able to vote, but that would be ideal.
But they would never allow that because then nobody would fund their earmarks and pet projects, so...
even more than half of what they fund would not get done right now. All right, time for hot takes. Mine this week is, I don't know, maybe this is Karen energy, but I have strong opinions about how people travel. I am a very efficient traveler, as I am in most things I undertake, and I have no patience for people who are bad travelers. And what I mean by that is there are a number of behaviors that you need to, display when you get to the airport, right? Like we are all just trying to get through this hellhole the government has created. Look alive, pick up your feet, know where you're going, read the signs, and when you get into the line, I don't care if you're in general boarding with the peasants, I don't care if you're in pre-check, I don't care if you're in clear, get your ID out, have your boarding pass ready. When you get to the gate, look alive, take your computer out, take your shoes off if you're not in pre-check. You know what you have to do. Why are you waiting till you have 5 people behind you and you're all of a sudden just turning to take off your belt? I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. Why do you need to go through the metal detector 5 times? Take your change out of your pocket, Fred. This is not rocket science. And then once you are on the plane, if you have a carry-on, it goes by your seat. If you are going to be boarding like C-list with Southwest and you probably aren't going to have that good of a pick of seats, you probably shouldn't be bringing a carry-on. You should probably check your bag. If you're flying other airlines, you can more adequately prepare. But the people who try to board a flight and there's no like overhead space by their seat, so they then take their bag all the way to the back of the plane and then come back and sit. And then when it's time to get off, nobody can get off because homeboy's having to like rush against the crowd to try to get back there and get his bag, or we're all having to pass it over our heads like it's crowd surfing. What are you doing? I can't stand it. It is the equivalent of people who drive slow in the fast lane, and you need to get it together in airports.
Absolutely. All right. Tell us how you really feel, Hannah.
I will run you over.
All right. My hot take is that people are sleeping on Apple TV. I actually think they're coming up with some good stuff. Everyone got Apple TV just to watch Ted Lasso, myself included. But since then, I've been watching both Silo and The Crowded Room, which are 2 different shows that are Apple TV exclusives, and they're both really, really good so far. And so I think Apple TV is trying to be like the next HBO, and so far I think they're coming up with some good stuff.
How do you have Apple TV? It's an app?
It's like Netflix or HBO. It's like something you subscribe to.
Oh, I didn't even know about Apple TV. Maybe I'll check it out. I need some good new shows now that Vanderpump Rules is over. I have a huge void in my life now for entertainment. Pretty sad about it. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Leave us a comment. Send us something to read in the mailbag. We'll see you next week. And until then, stay based.